On this episode of Real Wins, I welcome Authentic Co-Founder Bryant Hughes to the show to discuss what goes into our multifamily playbooks and how they've evolved for customers over time. If you find this and our other episodes helpful, please like and subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast listening app. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Bryant, welcome to the program. Another Real Wins episode, another guest appearance. Thanks for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So tell me before we jump in, what's new in the world of three girl dad life? You've been in it with the twins these last many months now.
Oh man, where do I even start? It's been a journey to say the least. All good things, maybe a couple challenges along the way. Sleep's getting better. Sleep's getting better. Last night, I was joking with my wife this morning that I think this is the first night that I've slept uninterrupted from when we put our head on the pillow to when we got up in the morning in, I don't know how long, definitely since the twins were born, but it's been a while.
Wow. So you're probably
Yeah,
feeling like a new man today.
feeling great today. The previous night, I think I was up for 3 or 4 hours at a time. So it's kind of hit or miss. Like 50% of the days are great. The other 50% are a struggle, but
Yep.
so is life.
Yep. Yeah, I feel ya. We're going to get to 6 weeks of newborn life here, and I'm completely pinned against the wall at this point with terrible sleep. So I completely
Yeah.
understand, and just got to put a smile on your face and keep moving. So,
Yep.
uh, but not the topic of this podcast today. We're actually welcoming you on as a guest again because we want to discuss this concept of multifamily playbooks, which is a rather new concept, I would say, for us, at least publicly at Authentic. We've definitely been working on it for many years now, in one form or another with the team. But I brought you on to discuss this because you're one of the main masterminds behind this. And I want to kind of dive into our history around it, specific to multifamily, maybe kind of where we came from. And I call this like the design, build, scale approach that we have come from, and what we've learned from that, and how it's evolved. So maybe give us like a brief history of that evolution. We can kind of dive into this idea of playbooks.
Yeah, for sure. So, going back many years at this point, maybe to the start when we first started doing a lot of um, property marketing, multifamily marketing, and sell-through marketing. Um, a fixture of our approach has always been this holistic idea of how we want to deliver our services. We've always really gravitated on this notion that like there's not going to be a single widget, a single service, a single campaign that's going to truly drive success for a project, especially in kind of like the crowded uh, multifamily industry or marketplace that there is today. Um, and just this idea that like real success for these projects happens when you can link your positioning and your branding and your digital strategy and your marketing campaigns and all of the different like nuts and bolts that make up a successful go-to-market strategy for a property. So you can link those all together in a comprehensive strategy, where you're kind of building in synergies with all of those things working so well together. So, that's kind of always been a fixture of our approach, is really looking at these projects and the marketing campaigns that we deliver very holistically. Um, and so that's kind of where it all started. Then over the years, one of the biggest challenges that we run into as a full service agency who does offer this comprehensive strategy, is we needed to find a way to like break apart our project into kind of different pieces, right? And that's always been challenging because every project that we work on is a little bit different in one way or another. Um, we'll have some projects that are timeline constrained. We'll have some projects where they're behind and they're underperforming on leasing, and they need to bring in a specialist like ourselves to kind of turn around how things are going and right the ship. And then we'll come into projects that are 500 plus units that have massive marketing budgets, who need to just be driving massive amounts of leases. And then we'll work on smaller projects with smaller budgets, but who equally deserve just as thoughtful of an approach, albeit a smaller one, that can fit within the budgets and constraints of a smaller project. Um, so our approach, comprehensive. We've always tried to break it apart, but we've always found like the need to really just build an approach that's flexible, that can accommodate all these different types of constraints. Um, and without trying to kill our team and drive up costs for our clients in the process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say, for a little bit of additional context for the listeners and viewers, is that you and I come from web design and development, a very tech driven background, certainly design as well. But I think you and I have had endless conversations around how do we sort of productize the work that we're doing, even though we're in a quote unquote service industry. I think you and I are always looking for ways to optimize and make it more product like, which on the one hand is maybe an altruistic goal and an unattainable goal, but one that we're always trying to look for to create efficiencies and create a better end goal, end product and end goals for our customers. Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at AuthenticFF.com. And by Charlesgate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charlesgate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more. I think as we found out over the last many years that, breaking them into buckets has worked okay. But to your point, projects can be big, projects can be small, budgets can be big, budgets can be small. And in being able to have that flexibility to accommodate those different projects and those constraints is super important. And obviously that leads us into where the idea of playbooks came from in the first place. So talk to us a little bit about the concept of playbook, quote unquote playbook, and really what that means for us at Authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, so playbooks as a concept is actually something that we've been doing for several years now, but then more recently have really developed as like a fixture of our approach in the way that we deliver our services. Um, and so playbooks, I guess where they initially came from was, I can't remember exactly when we're doing this reflection, but we were reflecting on some of the work that we were, doing over the past many years where, each year we work on 20 to 30 plus projects. And we were kind of reflecting on like, hey, there's a common set of approaches that work better than others that we found through our experience working on all these projects. And so we tried to start turning those approaches that worked into best practices that we utilized across all of our campaigns and deliverables. And then the more that we kind of defined those best practices, the more that we saw that a lot of those best practices kind of fit into different aspects of a project's go-to-market strategy. So there were some branding best practices, there were some website best practices, things like that. And so we started bundling those approaches into best practices, and then those best practices, as we grouped those together, became what we now call playbooks. And so initially, those playbooks were best practices and things for like construction signage and leasing collateral and property websites. And then more recently, we've expanded them to incorporate other types of marketing campaigns and services that are directly aimed at leasing and sell-through performance. So those would be things like demand generation playbooks or lead nurturing playbooks or sales and leasing enablement playbooks. It's basically a vehicle for us to take all of this strategy and experience that we've built over the years and showing how that strategy needs to inform the deliverables themselves so that those deliverables can do exactly what they need to do within this larger comprehensive strategy that I was talking about before.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this idea of, it's one thing to say go to market strategy, and it's another thing to actually have the strategy and the materials to back that up. And what I really like about playbooks is that it allows us to use playbooks as a way to inform creative, as a way to inform the marketing and the kind of the greater rollout of a campaign holistically, and not as a sort of individual deliverable or scope item that you might go out to a contractor for or something like that. these are playbooks that are sequentially developed and then released over the course of a development lifecycle from pre-construction through stabilization. And so that kind of gets at this question of, okay, kind of get playbooks, understand high level what they are. What about the structure of them? Because this comes up for me a lot when I'm speaking with new customers. Okay, I kind of get playbooks, but like, what do I get out of that? How are they structured? What do they look like? Maybe you could dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, at Authentic, we basically break our service offering into like two types of services. We have creative services, which are things like branding and building out collateral, signage, websites, all of like the pieces that make up the go-to marketing strategy. And then we have marketing services, which are kind of the campaigns that we run during a sell-through or a lease-up that drive demand, that nurture leads, and that really like aim to, stabilize the property or sell through the property. Um, and so within both of those phases, or excuse me, both of those parts of our service offering, we have playbooks. Um, and we have a brand design and development playbook that's really specifically built for our brand development process. Um, we have a construction signage playbook. We have an experiential brand activation playbook. Um, we have a playbook related to our websites and kind of digital strategy. And then we have things like signage and wayfinding playbooks and other pieces that are specifically related to the ways that the brand needs to be activated on site in order to, be elevating the brand experience and creating the best leasing and sell through process possible for people at every touch point that they hit along their journey. Um, and so any particular playbook, and again, there's like I think there's around 8 total playbooks. Um, all of those playbooks are broken down into the phases of a property, like you were mentioning before, kind of like the development life cycle, right? So if we have 8 playbooks, each of those playbooks has a specific section for the construction phase, for the pre-leasing phase, for the active leasing phase, for the final leasing phase, and then once a project is stabilized for a leasing project. Um, and so, what we found in like working on these projects and with these comprehensive strategies is that, not only do we need to be delivering services, but those services need to adjust over the course of the project. So, the recommendations that we're making for the property website during construction are going to be a lot different than what the property website needs to be doing during active leasing. Same thing for the demand generation, right? Like, how do your paid advertising campaigns need to be performing and functioning during pre-leasing or even like during construction, maybe even before pre-leasing starts? That's going to be way different than the campaigns that you're running during your final leasing when your property is, maybe 75% stabilized. You're trying to fill some like hard to fill units. How does your strategy need to adjust for that final phase? And so, yeah, in each of the playbook, we highlight kind of the strategies that pertain to the individual deliverables and services that are related to the playbook, and then how those need to adapt over the different phases of our project. And so, yeah, that's essentially the way that it works, and kind of how we outline the full strategy for the property.
That's, to me, that's the beauty of the playbook, because the point that I was latching onto was the example of the demand gen playbook, right? Like, demand means something very different from day zero to CO. And so
Right.
the demand playbook is going to talk through recommendations and steps to take for early awareness, early activation, early awareness, which, by the way, ties into another playbook or two that is going to actually have sort of the creative and marketing aspects of that early awareness phase. Then the demand phase is going to talk about demand generation as a whole, and then later on demand capture and scale as things shift with the project. And so, to me, the idea of a playbook is beautiful, because it kind of pulls the quote unquote deliverables out of the line items and into a true document, a playbook that is a guide for our customers, which, again, is relatively new for us to sort of package it this way, but it's something that we found is working really well, and really connects the dots front to back for our clients. One of the things that I want to kind of end with, just because this is a very specific conversation about playbooks, in your opinion, over the last, call it 2-3 years, what has been the biggest like aha moment of this transition from, call it, scattered deliverables to needing to push these into playbooks to have a more succinct document to deliver? Like, was there anything that happened over and over again, or sort of trends or themes that you saw occur time and time again that maybe a owner or developer was like missing or not catching on to?
Good question. You know, I think this answers your question, but correct me if it doesn't. But I would say the biggest thing that really drove us to creating projects relates to something we were talking about earlier, which is that there are just so many different flavors and sizes and types of projects that we get pulled into. Um, and when we were talking about the way that Authentic had offered services before, it was using this like design, build, scale approach, which is fine and in theory makes sense. We design, the marketing. We then build all the different pieces of collateral that are used during the leasing process, and then we scale that to drive demand and sell through and stabilize the building. But that's sort of like Authentic's way of doing it. And our clients don't necessarily know that approach just by
Mm,
hearing it. And so I think what these playbooks do is they're really built from the perspective of something that a developer would understand, right? A developer understands the need to develop a brand that really differentiates them and distinguishes them in the market. They understand the need to drive demand for their property. They understand the need to enable sales and leasing teams with kind of ad hoc marketing support. And then they also understand that like during the course of a project, there are different phases and things need to adjust during the phase or during each phase, excuse me. And so I think the biggest insight and the biggest wow moment was just kind of realizing how we need to kind of better orient our services to meet developers where they are, and to bring them kind of a strategic architecture that lets them understand the work that we're doing, the work that they need to be doing, and that really just informs the overall approach everyone's going to take to really bring the project home and make it a success.
absolutely. Yeah, giving them the architecture, and also I think being able to show how we drive value and ROI into the process at large is a critical shift in how these playbooks are being rolled out.
Yep.
Okay. Final rapid fire question for you today.
Mm-hmm.
How are the Timberwolves looking this season?
Really good. Kind of a decent start to the season. Couple of good games, couple of bad games. Julius Randle's really finding his fit. You know, DiVincenzo, the big ragu, is doing well, running around, getting threes off. I think Ant has like an over 50% 3-point percentage, and he's taken more than he ever has in his entire career. So we're looking good.
Man,
Yeah, the West is looking really good this year. The Thunder, in particular. So not really sure how we're going to fare against the Thunder, but in general, very optimistic.
nice. Well, good luck on
Mm-hmm.
your fantasy league this season. We'll have to
Thank you.
check back in a few months and see how it's all going. As always, Bryant, thank you for joining today on Real Wins. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris.